The final question, before we go to the interval, and you have a chance to chat with the candidates, is something that Lord Adonis touched on earlier on about other priorities once Brexit, one way or the other, is dealt with. So I would like to ask each candidate for their number one priority, the issue that most needs tackling in this country once we are no longer obsessed with Brexit. So, can I start with Neville?
I think I'll start with our energy policy. It's not working. We're closing down power stations, saying we're going green, wind turbines, whatever. I have no problem with that at all. But when you're then trying to say they want 1 million electric cars on the road in your time, they're not planning ahead and putting together a strategy. So I will say, basically, our energy policy is my number one job.
I think my number one policy would very much feed into some of the other themes here tonight, which is about engaging everybody in the conversation about what next for our country. And I think that starts with education. One of the things that I see a lot when we talk to people in debates and things like that is this country doesn't debate. It argues, and actually we need to learn how to have these constructive conversations. And it's something that in some of the hustings and different political platforms that we see, it's not about engaging positively. And I think that's something we need to take back right to grassroots and to when we're first entering education. I think there's a lot we need to do to broaden the curriculum that we offer to our children. There's moves in that direction now, but I think making everybody understand that their voice is valid and how to argue their point without getting into an argument about it will mean that the future of our political debate in this country is really much more positive and much more open. So I'd like to take it back to education and everything that that means.
So our politics is broken and there is so much for us to do. But if I had to focus on one thing, I would definitely say our planet is breaking. And I think this is an area where we can show real leadership. Our international reputation is in tatters because of Brexit. And there are those people in the Brexit Party and others and in the Conservatives who say, we're doing enough. We don't need to do any more. We're doing our share. We don't hardly pollute at all. It's 2% of emissions. I completely disagree with that. I think we have an opportunity to show leadership in the world and leadership in Europe around climate change, to show this is something that we care about, our children care about, and that we can take action now that helps our planet and helps our country.
I think the answer to this question could get quite repetitive, but it's interesting that Jim talked about showing leadership in Europe on climate change, because during the coalition years, the energy minister was a Liberal Democrat, Ed Davey, and he worked tirelessly in Europe to make sure that Europe pushed for tougher emissions targets for the Paris Climate Treaty, and he showed great leadership in Europe on climate issues. When the coalition ended, the Conservatives ended funding for the Green Deal, they scrapped subsidies for renewables, they sold the Green Investment Bank, they ended tax breaks for clean cars, they abolished the rules on zero carbon homes, and I could go on, that's not the end of the list. This government is not concerned about climate change, it has never been a priority, and I think for the sake of our planet, I would like to see, first of all, a change in government, and then I think that the only thing we should prioritise is the climate change fight, because if we don't get that right, then everything else is irrelevant, frankly, and we can only do that in the European Union with our European friends and allies, because climate change, the climate crisis does not stop at national borders. We have to do it together.
First of all, no government of whatever party in any country can just have one priority. So the question is theoretical, and you're spoiled for choice. Knife crime, the health service, education, pensions, old folks' care, you're spoiled for choice. If I have to choose, it would be between the health service, which is creaking at the seams, and if you think it's just about money, you haven't studied the history of the health service over the past 4 decades. So I would choose between the health service and getting proper law and order in some of our inner cities where people, ordinary people, are afraid to go about their daily business. I think that is a disgrace in Britain in the 21st century. But as I say, no government has just one priority. It's a bit of a nonsense question.
Well, I think Anne has led very well into my answer again, because she outlines the crises we're facing, but we're not addressing these crises because we're in the middle of Brexit paralysis and we're not being governed. We're effectively absent of government with all these crises going on. And of course, top of my list, as I said in my introductory remarks, is the climate crisis. I have to say, I've heard Caroline say this before about the Lib Dems on the climate, but I sit in the European Parliament and very often they vote against the proposals we're making, which the Socialists support, to take much stronger action on climate. I was very fortunate to be able to hear Greta Thunberg speak in the European Parliament. She's an electrifying speaker, and it was really moving to think how we've let down her and her generation. And it's taken our young people on the streets to convince us that we have to respond to their fight for their very future. Anyway, we have done that. The conversation's been transformed in this country, and I think that's an amazing thing. And we need to take the opportunity now to take that action. It's true what Caroline said. There's no point in taking climate action in one country. We have to cooperate. That's why leaving the European Union would make it much harder to address the issue of climate change. But also, we can use our power as a trading bloc, 500 million of the world's richest people, to make sure that standards are raised elsewhere. That's how the European Union works when it works well. We set high standards, and then we can refuse to let in products that don't meet those standards. I've got MEPs to sign a letter saying that we will not sign off on the trade deal with Latin America while the Brazilian president is chopping down the rainforest. We can also refuse to have products from Trump's America. This is the way that we use the power of Europe and the high standards of Europe to address the global crisis of climate change.
Thank you, Molly.
Obviously, there are lots of priorities, and you want your leaders to deal with them all. But in my view, the biggest scourge on our society at the moment is the dramatic rise in homelessness and the demand for food banks, even here in Bournemouth and places which, looked at nationally, are reasonably well off. We should end that. Everyone should have a right to somewhere to live. We should dramatically increase the rate of home building, including home building for social rents, at affordable rents, which simply isn't available at the moment. We are only building 1/10 as many social homes as we were 30 years ago. We're supposed to be becoming more civilised. We're becoming less civilised. Let's end homelessness, let's end food banks, and let's not spend 39 billion pounds on a Brexit, which means that we can't afford to do any of that.